Good morning, everybody. It's about 2 minutes to 10 right now. So we have started the broadcast. We are going to wait until 10 o'clock. We have a nice sized group of about 47 people who've registered for this presentation today with Rob and Dan. So just hang in there and we will get back to you. Welcome, everybody. Glad you came. If you have any questions or concerns, you can use the questions or chat feature that you see on your screen at any time. I will be monitoring that throughout the presentation. So I'm going to go quiet now for a little bit until we are at 10 o'clock. Welcome and good morning.
Thank you, Teresa. Okay.
Okay, welcome everyone to today's presentation on innovations in print. We have with us two experts in the field, Dan Loomis and Rob Schmidt. And before we get started, just a few notes of welcome and then also just about process. So welcome to the beginning of our webinar series, kind of what I affectionately call Catholic Publishing Summer School, replacing our annual membership meeting, which would have been last week. And just for those of you who are here, who are members of the Association of Catholic Publishers, please note that the 2021 membership meeting will be on June 3rd to the 4th in 2021. That's the Thursday and Friday after Memorial Day. So we hope that all of the health issues that are impacting our ability to gather will be resolved, and we can indeed come together as a group in Chicago on June 3rd and 4th next year. In lieu of that, this year, we are doing a series of webinars. The speakers that I had engaged for the in-person presentations, including Dan and Rob, have graciously said that they would be happy to give their presentation so that we can continue our professional development efforts as an association. So that being said, let's move ahead with today's presentation.
Right.
As I mentioned, Rob Schmidt and Dan Loomis are our presenters. Unfortunately, yes, they both have the names Dan Loomis on their screens, but Rob is the one in the light colored shirt and Dan is the one in the dark colored, or no, yes, right. No, Rob is the dark colored shirt. Which one's
I'm here, Rob.
Shirt, Rob's in the light colored shirt. See, I'm even confused. They are going to be our presenters today. And so without much ado, as I said a couple of minutes ago, if you have any questions or concerns or comments, please feel free to use the question or chat feature. I will be monitoring that throughout the presentation. We will have time for Q&A at the end. If there's something that we want to ask, you need to ask in the middle, I will pay attention to that and let Rob or Dan know. So let us proceed. And I'm going to give the microphone over to whoever's going to speak. So Dan or Rob, which one's going to go first? Rob?
Well, I'll start off first. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. This is an interesting opportunity for me. This is my first webinar, so bear with me as I work through this, but I'm excited to be part of the group today and part of ACP. So look forward to our presentation as we talk about printing and a passion that both Dan and I have. We have some interesting connections. We'll talk about that in a moment. But my background, I am a father of 5 kids. I was a past president of a congregation, and it's a Lutheran congregation, but still a connection to a congregation for many years, and then also on the church council. So I get a little bit of the workings of the body of the church and what's important and how to reach those members within those congregations, and then also manage it from many years in printing. So I am with a company called Royle Printing. We're located in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. I've been with the company for 32 years. I started in April of 1988. And we were established back in 1948. We did some newspaper printing early in our days, but then we became more of a commercial web printing company. And we support many publishers and catalogers, it's all of their print services and then all of the mailing requirements and services. So it's a little different than the space you're in the book field, probably more so on that publishing side. This might resonate a little bit more with some of the folks on the marketing side of the business, but it's printing and it's ink and dots on paper. So there's some creative things that have changed that Dan and I will talk about as we go forward in the industry. We're going to talk about some of the impacts of COVID and just really even some of the history of print as we move forward too as well. But the majority of the work that we do here at Royle Printing, just to understand where my background and history comes from, is in the heat set web printing market. So Dan, I'll let you do your introduction.
Sounds good. Thanks, Rob. I am the real Dan Loomis on the webinar. Rob's name is representing. So first and foremost, just blessed to be married to 28 years to my high school sweetheart. We have 2 kids, 20 and 24. I'm the director of market development at Omnipress, and really my emphasis outside of work and in the association arena is AE and ATD, where it's really about continuing education, and that's my emphasis throughout the years. I've been members on and off of those organizations. Rob mentioned I'm employed at Omnipress in Madison, Wisconsin for the past 32 years as well. And as Rob and I were beginning to talk about our connections in the printing industry, we have certainly different paths. The Omnipress serves about 500 associations and homeschoolers each year to help deliver their printed content, mostly on the book side of things. We're very much a short run printer. And so Rob and I never really had a chance to interact a whole lot over the years. And recently we discovered that we both started in 1988 with our respective organizations. It was kind of ironic, and we have totally different life experiences, and turns out we live about 3 blocks from each other here in our hometown too.
Right.
So I don't know how that works. But Omnipress started out as a small university printer, helping out students here in Madison, Wisconsin, and quickly shifted to the association arena, where we help associations with their publication, book printing, printing for instructor-led courses and seminars and annual conferences. And so again, we're a short-run printer under 5,000 quantity. I'd say our sweet spot is 50 to 2,000, with a full range of fulfillment services, US and international, shipping to about 250 countries a year. So although I don't know everything about the publishing arena and the book arena, I certainly know what we do on the short run side of things. And I'm hoping that just the experience and with the instructor-led training courses, we can just share some ideas and really talk about print and how it might impact you in the future.
Exactly. Thanks, Dan, for that. And as we continue on, part of the overview of the session, again, super short focus on print history, but it's an impact on where we're at today and getting an understanding there. We want to talk also about the power of print. These are tools that we bring to our clients on a daily basis on things and areas that we recommend their ability to use unique features in the print arena. And you've probably seen some of these as well. But there's a fair share of creative ideas that go into it. And that's the true power of print, whether it's the content that's produced or the design elements that everyone puts into the job. The paper used, all of those attributes. There's so many things that go into a final product that plays through the power of print. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about finding the right partner. One thing that I've kind of experienced here in the last month, 2 months in these conversations I've had and prepping for this meeting was just to kind of listen to the customers that I'm talking to and the prospects that I'm reaching out to. And I find interesting feedback from them, and I'm going to share a little bit of that as well. And that might play an important role as you move forward in some of your decision making with your print partners or maybe future ones that you find. What we hope you can learn from this is how print has changed, how print remains valuable, and that by being creative, it also plays a huge part in how that's going to benefit your readers and the products you're producing. Again, deciding who that right partner might be. And then also I'm going to talk a little bit at the end about list management, but more there's some postal opportunities for discounts that you may or may not know about. And we'll share those today as we discuss this important part about print and the innovation of print. So moving on, the history of print. It's a short lesson. The first press started in 1436, and it had a major impact on the world at that time. And printing was on paper and many other substrates. But as we evolved in print, it just became something that got more productive, faster production. And we're going to just fly right from 1436 into the catalog age. We're not going to cover a lot of any other history there on print, but the catalog age became this great expansion. And from the 70s to the 90s, there was a ton of growth in the printing industry. And so what's happened in that time frame, adding to that, the internet now and social media, we've watched this constriction of this great expansion. So now printing companies, large printing companies, you may know of Quad Graphics, R.R. Donnelley, or LSC Communications. Those companies have experienced a point where they're really getting smaller, and the changes in the dynamics that they're having on the print side of things to the industry as a whole. So that's been a huge change overall. Dan, I mean, you've seen it on your end, the impact of how you went from this expansion time frame to now the impacts of internet and social media. What experiences have you had?
Yeah, well, I think just in general, the print industry was certainly with the internet, everybody was starting to question the relevancy of print and the value and the longevity. And through time, and I think as we go through this webinar, we start realizing that there is value, and it's the print industry is nimble, and it's certainly has had its challenges with the internet and the arrival of communication. And I think what happens is the pendulum quickly shifts, and people look at their budgets and want to do things with putting things online. But quickly then members have been also, what I've seen is as associations have moved to an all online, they've come back to print because of the value and the members. And in my world, what we've seen is because it's a lot of continuing education content, they're really looking at the deep learning and the value of that retention. And so they brought print back because members wanted to touch and feel and hold that book. But there certainly are a lot of challenges across the board.
Right. So that expansion that took place, now we watch this change. And the real change is huge impact on the print industry. So Quad Graphics and LSC Communications, LSC is going through right now a bankruptcy process. I mean, this was the largest printer in the world for the longest time. And those elements have changed. While they've closed multiple printing facilities, their book division stays pretty strong at the moment. And there's other larger printers in the country too that manage the book printing production side. But on the commercial side, as catalogers, as marketing changes to this online opportunity, it's another choice in another space, but it's not an end to print. And I'm sure all of you know that and have experienced that and understand that. From my end, I have a 31-year-old son who loves a book and embraces the paper and the design and the creativity that goes into it, the finishes that might be on those books. So print still plays a real valuable role. And we just got into this now COVID event. And what's that future look like? I mean, again, Dan, you and I are both in just two industries, right? You're managing these smaller print runs. You see a picture here, that's a new press going on the floor at Royle Printing. They're not the presses that they used to be. Those are big pieces of equipment, large investments that different printers have to put in place. And if those organizations aren't being profitable, it's hard to make those large investments and expand in their organizations into new places. We believe as a commercial printer yet in print, and that print is going to play a factor for many years yet. There's a lot of printing out there, and there's a lot produced. And as the kind of movement with internet and social media evolve, we still believe that it's a critical way of getting to people, if not more so now, and being creative on how that message gets into the mailbox every day. And so that's that portion of what I see. We aren't seeing this great change yet, but we're going to talk about some changes that are there, and Dan's going to cover a little of it here. So printing methods. Printing methods really are of three choices. We've got digital print production, we've got sheet fed print production, and then we have web print production. So Dan, if you could, your experience and background is a little bit more on the digital side, short run nature. Give us a little bit of input on what you're seeing in that space, the changes that are taking place in that market and what you're seeing on your end.
Yeah, absolutely. So the changes, it's always happening. I think as far as the equipment, there are some minor changes. The big revolution really was back in 1967 when they really started getting into high-speed copiers, and that world started changing. That's where the digital world really started to evolve. And at OmniPress, we ran a lot of offset short-run printing. And today that's really replaced with the digital type of equipment that we have. And it's in 2010, OSE and Canon combined, and it created an explosion of technology and evolution. And so really, as old as you mentioned the industry, Rob, at 1436, was it?
Yes.
I mean, there's changes along the way, but the biggest one for the digital world was in 2010 with that merger. And that technology has really allowed us to expand our print quantities using that type of equipment. We had a lot less labor and setup, and essentially zero waste on paper. When you were waiting for press setup, could be 20, 30, 40 pages on some of the things we were running, to now it's the first sheet off the press is perfect. And so it's the quality has changed dramatically. The biggest change for the consumer has really been the price of color printing on short run has changed dramatically. It used to be color printing was upwards of 5 to 10 times the price of black and white when you're talking about a really small short run press. And nowadays it's maybe 2.5, 3 times, and obviously depending on your specs and book specifications, there's a lot of different variables there. But for the most part, it's coming within reason. And I think we're going to see that evolution on the digital print only continue to increase in quantities. I think 5,000, 10,000, you're going to see them up in the high 20s, 30,000s with the new inkjet printers that are on the horizon, the high-speed inkjet printing. It's going to be pretty phenomenal. And I think that's going to create a lot of great quality color match type situations for the end users too.
Yeah, absolutely. That will be the technology factor where digital printing is really that much more connected to the technology factor versus our web and sheet fed side. But those movements have changed too. I mean, presses like this one here, our sheet fed KBA press, the technologies have also improved in those arenas too, to reduce cost or maintain cost, and allow us to do a lot more things quicker with less waste. It's an environmental benefit on the sheet fed side and on the web side. Well, even digital, if you can do projects without waste, those are big steps forward from an environmental impact too. So that benefits this print arena. But sheet fed, speeds have changed too. Those have gotten faster. So as digital has stepped into their space, sheet fed has expanded a little bit as well. Different inks are being used. UV inks are quite popular. And then different coating elements are also a huge benefit to the sheet fed arena with the soft touch, aqueous coatings, and reticulations. Those kinds of coating offers are great. And then you just add more printing units into the press and you can do some pretty creative things on the sheet fed arena. And then on the web arena, our change there is speed and technology. This big press that's in that picture right now will be run with an iPad, and one person can run the press as far as controlling it. So the technology, while it's impacted that digital arena and the creativity and the things that go into that short space market, the website has seen huge advancements in technology. So make readies that used to be 5,000-6,000 copies are now down to under 1,000 copies on a make ready production. So web printing has evolved a lot in that technology. The quality, the registration controls, all of those things allow us to produce print runs of 5,000 quantity or greater. And we've done some work that's less than that as well at certain times, but you produce a really good quality piece. In those short print runs, there's not a lot of color control that someone can come to a press okay and adjust color to their particular needs because of the speed at which those presses run. This one in this picture will be running somewhere between 70 to 80,000 impressions of a 16 or 32 page form every hour. So speed is the big benefit that has happened in expanding into this world today on that website.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah, go ahead.
Question for you. So I know on the digital print side of things, one of the benefits has been there's a lot of different finishing options now that are done in line with the digital print equipment, which used to rely on for us would be 2 to 4 people, now is handled by one person in the machine. Is that also the case on the larger web stuff where there's more inline capabilities?
Yeah, there is. I mean, there's not so much as far as finishing opportunities or coatings and that nature. We're still pretty much 4-color or 5-color presses in that regard. So we're offering that extra ink option in there. The only other things that's really come online is just more automation on the back end of the equipment. There's pallet stackers or skid equipment that allows a press to log the signatures without an individual working on the end of the press, and then those things pitch the skids off to the side, and a forklift comes by and picks it up on a regular basis. So the technology has added those advancements to reduce labor in a few places, and tough labor, those opportunities to have to lift those large logs and so forth every day and move that material has changed significantly. So that's the print methods, which we use, and that's the space that we're talking about here today. We're going to move on into the power of print. This is more of the creativity side of things. This is where we want to bring some samples and examples. And I work with a number of, our organization works with a number of different Christian publishing organizations. One of them, Liturgy Training, they're part of your group and part of your membership. And we just printed this piece here the other day for them. It was their marketing brochure for their fall titles, and that's some of the materials and so forth that we print. But I want to talk about the power of print and using some of the unique features out there in print. And again, this is probably going to resonate a little bit more on the marketing side than it is on the publishing side. And that's our space. That's been my space for 32 years. So I bring that to you, and hopefully some of those will resonate as we go through some of the examples that I've got here. But we'll talk about belly bands, some creative coatings. I'll try and show some of those, cover tips, some unique Post-it notes, and some creative ideas that go in with those gate inserts, gate covers, and even QR codes. And then Dan will also cover some unique binding features that they experience on their end. So one of the pieces here is unique to Royle Printing. A typical, on the right-hand side, you got a belly band that wraps around the entire book. And those are great for announcing a conference or a new product. Maybe it only goes to a small fraction of people. We don't have publishers put it on every single book, but they have certain audiences that they want to bring a message, or even an advertiser is playing a certain role and they're dealing with this belly band that wraps around the entire book. But this one on the left, called a belly tip, part of an advertiser on the back side of a publication would be that they aren't really thrilled about having the back cover ad blocked or covered by this belly band that they sold on the front. So we put a bead of glue on both the left and right hand sides of this golf course industry magazine, and that green piece in the middle is the belly tip. And it's removable and also very front and center to the reader as they receive that. So that's two unique things. The Post-it notes. So how do we use Post-it notes? Well, these three publications focus on the family. Their teen girls publication, they used a Post-it note to engage teens and their parents by going online and doing a survey. So they have a QR code on that Post-it note, and allowing the teen and the parent to get online and take part in a survey. The Gideon, this one I thought was very creative. It just had a simple request: who are you praying for? And then they gave 3 different lines on there for you to put a name on, and then put it in a place that would be close to you so that you could remember it. And inside the publication, they got a little note there that says, take a peek inside on page 5, and they describe a little bit more of what they want you to get from the impact of that simple note that was put on the front cover of their piece. And then we see a lot of publishers and a lot of folks use these Post-it notes for renewals, membership reach, and trying to engage members on just their opportunity to continue their renewal of their subscription. I talked about coatings and some creativity going on in coatings, and it's hard to capture in the light, but I think you can see the reflective glare in that area. This is something called reticulated UV. There's some really neat stuff that can be done, and it's done with incredible precision. And I think reticulated UV happened out of a mistake one day, but nothing's been proven back to that. But a varnish, a regular varnish, was applied to a press sheet, and where you see that bright light in the photo and more of a rough texture, the UV coating is overlaid on the varnish, and it interacts to make this textured coating feel. And then in the bottom portion of that image on reticulated UV, where it's kind of got a sphere and all of the connecting lights on there, that's all glossy UV coating. So those two pieces are the two coatings of varnish and a UV create for perfect register on the press, and give you these two different feels. And that rough feeling can also be replaced with a smooth finish, so you can get just a gloss and dull contrast. Another coating option is soft touch, and this is probably something you're familiar with. Many of the books published today have soft touch UV coatings applied to them. And then if you incorporate some of the spot coatings like this Direct Supply catalog cover did, they put a glossy coating on all the colored chairs. Soft touch was in all of the other areas of white, and then they also incorporated a foil stamp. Those are things that you're probably experiencing more on the book side. And then this last one on the right was actually a pop-up cow. It was an advertisement inside of a 4-pager, and they used all of those features as well. The eye on the cow was a gloss UV coating, and then various other elements were coated in that space. Continuing on, Focus on the Family, their club junior publication required some stickers. And we have many associations that will also incorporate that as a blow-in. So whether it's into a catalog or into a magazine, these blow-ins on the right hand were also stickers. And you could blow in quite a few varieties of different things into some of your marketing material if there's an interest in doing that. And then cover tips. These are also unique in tipping. This is again applied with some glue to bring that message to the front. Up in the right hand corner, the folks at Global Finance, they put in a piece that folds out like a large map. And so you can get unique things into your publications that way as you consider different options. And then there's a gatefold cover. Dan, there's some different binding options you guys do. We do some basic stitching and perfect binding. You have some other options here.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think, just on the book side of things, what we're seeing, and I didn't want to recover everything that you talked about, but it certainly is about that enhancement of the covers, different types of laminations, and really to enhance that publication. So what we see on the right-hand side is bleed tabs. I'm sure many of you that are producing books are familiar with that technique. A lot of them are different colors based on a chapter or a section that you want to highlight. So essentially just print it on the edge of the sheet. Again, with the popularity of color, we're seeing a lot more of that type of enhancement to the interior of the content. And then from a binding standpoint, we're seeing, lay flat binding, especially across course materials, but we're also finding that with publications who want to have a nice shelf presence of a perfectly bound book because it has a spine, it looks great on the shelf, but then can lay flat and people can take notes or highlight something that they want to refer back to. And so we're seeing that type of movement on the book side as well, even on the short run.
Is there a considerable cost difference on the typical binding versus lay flat?
There is a difference in the binding types. I don't know. I mean, if somebody's certainly interested, we could look at page count and specifications and get some quotes. There are some differences on that. So it's a little bit of, the value to it, but overall, and the turn time's a little bit longer for us.
Yeah, well, some of those options that we spoke about, the ones that I covered beforehand too, while there are cost implications, many of those are not large costs. The gatefold cover is a very cost-effective way to add on an additional page to a cover that's already printing. So whether it's on the book side or on a marketing piece or a publication, those are great ways to add those things in. And even coatings, depending on your print runs and in the smaller print capacity, adding coatings are fairly inexpensive steps because you're already running through the press If you get real creative and add foil stamping and embossing and so forth, those are extra features that get added on, an extra cost because there are other passes through the press. But trying to maximize that print run, trying to maximize everything that you're doing in the bindery process without having to take on extra steps. Blow-ins are $3.50 to blow in a card or blow in one of those stickers. Those are inexpensive steps to add into the equation. The Post-it notes are also applied during the binding process. So take advantage of those, learn about those, reach out to your current vendors and see what capabilities they have to offer in those areas. And you'll find that some of those are pretty inexpensive.
Rob, I think that's a good point. I do have conversations where sometimes people will have a tendency to rule out an option before understanding because it looks expensive. So have the conversation, right? And it doesn't hurt to ask. And with technology, things are being solved. And so you start offering, there's a lot more cost-effective options than there used to be.
Right. Well, some of the things that we'll talk about here, that's a good lead into the publishers' conversations. That's all that we can encourage from Dan and I doing this for as many years as we've had, and 64 years combined. I can only encourage that. And of course, I come from a sales side, so right, I want to have that conversation. But what I've experienced here, and I'm going to talk about a couple of these here, these are unique situations right now that have played a role. And I just had my screen coming over. Up. All right, hang in there a moment. Are we experiencing some technical difficulties?
Yeah, it appears Teresa took back controls, looking like we're having some audio.
Okay. Is it my audio?
I'm not sure. Maybe if anybody could hear us, could they potentially send a chat indicating that they're okay? I'm not sure if it's just something on Teresa's end.
Teresa's sending us a note here. We lost the audio on both ends. Interesting. She's trying to fix it, but I don't know how. Okay, we'll send her a quick email back. I'll get her an email.
Rob, I wonder if we would log out and log in, if that would work, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned. I've now lost the background screen.
Yeah, I think she took control again.
Yeah, all I've got is my presentation. I'll let you watch because I've lost my feed too. So give me an update.
Okay. I just have a picture of you and I on screen with audio.
Okay.
No. If anybody could hear us, if they could chat, that would be helpful. Otherwise, I'm assuming everybody's out. My microphone appears to be working as I hit the audio. The sound check sound looks good.
You and I are talking between each other, so we know that it's working.
Yeah.
Okay, the web organizer has stopped sharing your webcam. It is no longer visible to any attendees. Okay.
I don't see that. I just see myself.
Yeah, I wonder if we log out and log back in. You want to try it? We got 10, 12 attendees yet. They haven't all dropped off.
I don't know. I'm going to wait for Teresa maybe to.
All right, I'm back on.
Send something. I'm going to try to hook my other monitor up and see if I get another email.
You've got the PowerPoint back up. Do you see that?
I don't see the PowerPoint. I just see you and I.
Did you see PowerPoint before?
Yeah. I saw
Okay.
a PowerPoint with you and I on top.
Well, that's a bummer.
Let's see what we got here.
Oh, do we have a thing from her to connect to the webinar? No, that's just me.
I'm gonna log in and see if I got some new email or anything. Oh, here we go. Looks like she's getting it started again.
Well, there's a green. That might be positive. I don't know what to do. I feel terrible. You want to email her back? I can email her off my phone.
Yeah, I'll email her.
That made mine a lot easier at the end.
Yeah.
She's telling us here. Rob, I'm going to share your screen again and just keep going. Okay. I can do that. I can get our mind back on. How's that? You see my screen? You see my screen?
I'm good.
All right. Well, I'll keep going. Hopefully people are hearing us. You hear me, Dan, so we've got that connected.
I'm good.
You're
and it's
good.
recorded, so we can share.
Okay. So yeah, we'll go from there. Sorry for the interruption, everybody, and for those that have stayed online with us at the moment, we'll continue on. So print conversations, what I've experienced again in the last couple of months, and especially when we've had this COVID environment take place, and it's not that these conversations weren't taking place before, but I also feel and get a sense that various people in a position to buy printing are being a little bit more open to a conversation. They have maybe a little bit more time while they're working from home to take that phone call. We've engaged in some great stuff. So I have one customer that reached out to me, or a prospect that said, boy, I'm afraid of change. And it's always that fear factor of making change, Dan. I mean, you experience it in life alone, as do I. But that change is always a difficult thing. But imagining in a publisher's standpoint, this gentleman, his father started the business, and now he's having to, for the first time, go out and get printing bids. And where do you start?
Yeah, it's scary. I think it is about just having the conversation and finding people that are willing to have the, express a point of view. And I know sometimes people, they'll throw out RFPs or, looking for quotes. And I think that kind of, to me, sometimes shortens that or disconnects the importance of that real conversation. I think it's just a matter of call people up, and there should be no pressure in anything. I know for me, Rob, like you said, in sales, you like to have the conversation, but it's not about selling something. It's about providing a solution that's going to work. And
right.
But in recognizing that it's difficult for somebody like that, that's their father started it, and now they've got to continue. It's
right.
It's hard.
Right. Yeah, and for this, I had my conversation with him last night. We haven't presented our final pricing to them yet, but there is a difference. We're not able to achieve something that he's been used to for a long time. And in that, I had just that honest discussion with him. That's what I want to create, is confidence and trust in that relationship. And I don't want him to move just because I'm a friendly person on the other end. I want him to move because it's good for his business and a good decision for them long term. That's going to make that a great relationship for both of us as we go forward. So that was one experience. Don't be afraid. Reach out, contact your different printers, find different organizations, learn what they do, because what really is most important is finding that right home and having those discussions. One other person I reached out to, I had a conversation with them, and the first statement they said, well, we use uncoated papers because it looks inexpensive. Well, uncoated papers can be inexpensive, certain uncoated papers, and seeing that in some of the Christian publishing arena, they don't want people to think that they've got all this money to spend on printing, so we're going to make it look cheap, and then we're going to put it on uncoated paper. Well, they were using a 70-pound uncoated paper text with a 80-pound cover uncoated stock. And those were opaque sheets. Those were expensive, far more expensive than some coated papers, right? So while they made it look inexpensive, it was very expensive to produce. And then the other thing that was unique about it was only 20 pages with a 4-page cover. And 20 pages is not a good print run for pretty much any press, especially when you're talking over 50,000 copies, which this was. So we could look at alternative ways of doing things. And so like for our equipment here at Royle Printing, we produce a lot of different equipment and different signature elements. So we produce 4s, 8s, 12s, 16s, 24s, 32s. So those page counts and producing on a press, finding the right press to do the job, finding the right papers, and not just one paper that may look inexpensive that's expensive, is the right things that you need to consider and look at. And your print salesperson, your companies that you're working with should be able to offer more than just a cost or two. And in this time of COVID, it's almost that much more important as budgets are shrunk to really engage and really look for some of those new and creative paper options that might be out there. Now, I say new and creative paper options. Paper is probably in the same boat as printing. It's constricting at the moment, and the paper companies are giving less options, and they're reducing the number of choices that we have in the marketplace, but they're getting super focused on being cost effective in the production of the pieces that they do. So somebody that might produce a groundwood paper number 4 sheet might not expand into the 70-pound market anymore because they're not good at it, and they leave that for some of the better paper options. So I don't know if you've seen some of those changes too as well, Dan, but be smart with that, with those paper choices. And paper is on our end, paper 60 to 70% of a print job and of the cost. So the printer can only do so much, and then they have to deal with that large portion of a bill, which is the paper side of things.
Absolutely. And I think, Rob, what you're really talking about, like you said, there might be some limitations in paper, but there might be something new that you haven't done before. And so it could be just because it, like on the book side that I talked about with binding, sometimes people think it is expensive when it's not. And then on this side, they think it's inexpensive, but it's not. So just, have the conversation, explore the options. There's always no harm in having it.
Right. So I had mentioned a little earlier in that portion about the uncoated papers and this customer producing a 20-pager with a 4-page cover. And I'll kind of repeat that here in this next discussion with a publisher who works with a big printer, and their capabilities, all they had was a press that produced 32-page forms, and they delivered 2 16-page press forms. And so they were locked into 16 pages and only doing 16-page increments. And they're a publisher. So if they sell some ads or create a book that only achieves a certain level of page counts, let's say it's 84 pages, so it's not a round number of 16-page forms, then those other odd pages become very expensive. Either you have to create more to get to the 88, or you produce less to drop down into a different page count range. But if you can find some of those printers out there that have more flexibility, more ability to meet your needs of alternative forms, it's really important to have that conversation. So that customer that produced a 20-pager with a 4-page cover, I gave them multiple options, a 24-page self-cover on a coated paper. I reduced the weight of the paper that they had and produced a 24 with a 4-page cover. But their one piece was $32,000 that they were producing 75,000 books for. And if we took it to a self-cover format on an 80-pound coated paper, they were paying almost half that much. So it was a $17,000 quote. So you're getting that message out there. Now, if the message still is important to portray that kind of an image, then obviously I don't want to change that for the sake of just saving money. Again, we spoke about using features earlier that benefit print and spending a little bit more money to get that experience of touch and feel into the reader's hands. So we don't want to take all those things away either on the sake of cost. But sometimes when those budgets are required, this is where those publisher conversations with printers are incredibly important.
Yeah, and if, like you said, Rob, if paper is that much of the run, if you can reduce that paper and add other features that you shared earlier with coatings, you can get 100% of, really looking at your brand in that design element. And I know there's other webinars this week on some of that stuff too, but I think it's really about, managing that paper cost and putting it where it can really enhance that brand, because there are some things that, like you said, can totally change everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so talking about expenses in a printing project, right? So we got paper that's 60% of the cost in most situations, and it can vary depending on the size and scope of the project. On those smaller jobs, paper isn't as as big of an expense. It's the time and the make-ready cost to get there. On the big, large print runs, paper becomes a greater portion of that cost. So be smart with that. But then we get to the mailing side and a mailing discussion. And one thing that I wanted to share with everybody today, we hope that we bring out a few new and creative ideas. Dan and I both spoke of that. We aren't experts in everything in print. We're experts kind of, and I wouldn't even call myself an expert, but a passionate person for our industries that we're in the commercial space on my end, and Dan on some of that educational and book publishing portion on your end. But mailing is another big expense, and Dan's going to speak a little bit more about that tomorrow on a fulfillment side and its impact. But we here at Royle Printing do far more single piece mailings. So when I say single piece, if we produce a 50,000 print run or a 30,000 print run, we're mailing almost all of those pieces through the USPS. So there's some postal incentives. I gave you a link here that you're all welcome to go to. Take a look at those promotions by the USPS. The simplest one is mobile shopping. You probably all have that capability today. And if you use those QR codes or a link that someone can take, a mobile device, activate that, and buy a book, you can save 2% on your postage. Now it's the USPS. So if there's any USPS fans out there, we also have to remember that the USPS has rules, and every one of them has a page or two that when you go to that link, you can learn about each one of these and the regulations behind it, so that you don't think that it's really easy, but it's pretty easy to get the 2% savings on the mobile shopping. Tactile, sensory, and integrative engagement or interactive engagement, excuse me. That's getting into the coatings and some of the finishes. That one's a little bit more of an iffy space within the post office and having to make sure you really follow the rules that they have there. And then the last one on there too, the earned value, and then the informed delivery. So informed delivery, if you don't have it, I get this at home because I just wanted to experience it myself, but I logged into the USPS and I get updated on my phone when my mail is going to arrive, and it's a scan of all the letter mail, not flat mail. So if there's and also packages, you can get information about that you're receiving them, but it's basically telling you what's going to be in your mailbox for the day. And there is a unique way that if you get into the informed delivery method, you can set up your piece so that it is in color instead of black and white. So they send scans of the product in my email. And if I have one that's in color, if I click on that one scan, it will direct link me to the company or the business that has that color attribute to their informed delivery offer. And so there's some 2% postal savings in that area as well. So be creative with that. Use those options. Again, I think the most popular and the easiest one is the mobile shopping, and would encourage you to use that if need be. And then Dan, do you have anything else to add on the distribution side, on that mailing end? I think you're going to say we don't want to spoil it for tomorrow's discussion on your
end. Right. We're going to keep the goodies for tomorrow's session, but right. No, right. I don't have anything to add, Rob. I think it's very good. I mean, we will talk tomorrow a little bit more about some printing methods and the distribution, but overall, I think with the mailing and everything, you've got it covered. So. Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to be able to take questions or not with Therese out. I did see one chat
okay.
earlier about having no audio, and sounds like there's a few people having trouble. So maybe it would just be best I don't see any new ones coming in. There still are attendees on.
Correct.
Maybe we could just end the webinar, and if there are other questions, they could forward to Therese and or ourselves. And
we'll leave this screen up here for a moment until this is ended. But we can reach out in emails to either one of us if there's questions that you might have about our services, our capabilities, or anything that you might be struggling with on the print side. We'd love to take your questions and have a discussion and have a conversation.
Rob and I are both on LinkedIn, so if you want to connect and build that relationship first before having conversations, we're certainly open to that as well. That's important. Certainly COVID has taught us the importance of relationships and the connections again. So thank you everybody for your time. Rob, thank you for stepping in and impersonating me there with the Dan Loomis tag. So great job. I had fun. I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Yeah, same here. And we look forward to connecting with everyone. Have a blessed day. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.